Morning, Dr. Welcher.
Good morning.
When we left off yesterday, I was asking you about some of your opinions. I'm going to ask you those questions again, but before we do, I'm going to ask you two other questions. The first is, I'd ask you to turn to your PowerPoint, slide 110.
You want me to display it?
Please. I'm going to ask you a question about a series of your slides regarding this effort. This is 110. Could you also follow through to 111, 12, 13, 14, 15?
You want me to play the videos?
You don't need to play the videos. I just want to acquaint you for the question.
111,
12,
112, 113, 114, 115.
How many times did you engage in testing where your arm and forearm touched the rear right of the exemplar Lexus?
3 times.
In any of those 3 times, did it ever leave any paint on the underside of your arm or forearm?
No.
If you could turn to slide 130, please. What? Could you go back one, please? Perhaps it's 131, Dr. Welcher. There we go. Could you explain the significance of this slide, please?
Your Honor, this is...
Oh, can you take that down, Dr. Welcher?
Sure.
Mr. Bryant.
We're going to move forward. Yesterday, when we left off, I had asked you,
So we need to take this.
Sorry,
you can take the PowerPoint down, please.
I was in a different spot on the slide. Hold on a second.
That's better.
Thank you. So I had asked you yesterday about some of your opinions. I
Correct.
want to ask you about some of your opinions relative to that last effort that you made regarding testing between the Lexus and your arm.
Correct.
You had mentioned earlier on in your testimony that you reviewed a number of pieces of information and offered that you relied on some of those pieces for your opinion. Can you share with us, for this part of your analysis, what pieces of evidence or information did you rely on for the opinions I'm going to ask you?
Relative to the testing on the arm contact on the taillight?
Yes.
So it was the physical evidence at the scene, the photographs of Miss Reed's vehicle, to a certain extent, my analysis of the Ring doorbell and the One Meadows event, the nature and the...
Your Honor, pardon my interruption. I just want to know if you read from something or not reading.
Looks like he's counting on his fingers. Are you reading from something?
No, I am counting on my finger. So I am counting on my finger. The Ring video doorbell, Mr. O'Keefe's height, the type of shoes he's wearing, because I needed the same type of shoes, my exemplar inspection where I matched up the heights, the locations of the lacerations, and then the tech stream data as well.
That information that you considered, in addition to the text stream data you considered, considering both those areas of information, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty in whether the damage to the defendant's Lexus is consistent with a collision with Mr. John O'Keefe on January 29th, 2022 at around 12:32 a.m.?
So there's been 2 potential theories that I've seen on that issue. One is a glass was thrown at the rear of the vehicle and shattered it. The second one was an impact to the arm. If the impact is basically more than approximately 8 miles an hour, it will likely break the taillight lens.
And do you have an opinion whether, based on the data and based on the physical damage and your testing, whether that is consistent with a collision or a impact with Mr. John O'Keefe?
It is consistent with the collision as long as it's greater than approximately 8 miles an hour.
Do you have an opinion whether it's consistent with an impact or collision with Mr. John O'Keefe on January 29, 2022 at around 12:32 a.m.?
With that caveat, yes.
In your testing, did you consider, or do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty, whether John O'Keefe's injuries on his arm, inevitably in the back of his head, are consistent with being struck by a Lexus identical to the defendant's Lexus on January 29, 2022?
Yes,
What's your opinion?
that it is. It is consistent with being struck by a Lexus and ultimately contacting a hard surface such as frozen ground.
And does that specifically pertain to January 29, 2022 around 12:30 a.m.?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow that.
Yes, it does.
To finish, I'd like to ask you a few more questions. You've written some papers on side swipe collisions or clipping. Can you describe for the jury and explain what a side swipe collision is or a clipping and how that may or may not differ from a direct hit on a pedestrian impact?
Sure. So what generally differentiates, say, side swipes or clipping contacts compared to, say, an inline impact or, say, a T-bone impact is what refers to that the object that you're hitting isn't accelerated up to the speed of the object that's coming in. So, for example, if I rear end a car, that car will be accelerated up as a result of the contact, and they reach what's called common velocity, and then they separate. And so in a glancing hit, you're going to have a glancing hit, and you don't have what's called complete momentum transfer, meaning the momentum from the car, because it's a glancing hit, doesn't completely transfer to the object being struck. For example, you can drive down the road at 100 miles an hour and clip the mirror of a parked car, and you'll break the mirror off, but you're not going to go from 100 to 0 instantaneously. You're just going to keep going because you don't have all that momentum transfer. So when you have glancing contacts, you can have much higher speeds without a lot of damage to the car because you're only in momentary contact and it's a glancing type hit.
You mentioned about potential damage to a car. How about potential damage to the pedestrian?
It's the same thing. So when you have a glancing hit to a pedestrian, this is referred to as a fender vault. In this case, they call it a fender. Fenders on the front of cars, because most pedestrian impacts involve the front of cars. In this case, it would be called a quarter panel vault, which means you're kind of vaulting off the corner of the car. Those are much more complicated because you don't have that common velocity that I referred to. So it's difficult to calculate the exact speeds at which the vehicle contacted without a whole bunch of information in that type of crash. If the impact has occurred in the center of the vehicle and we knew where the point of impact was and the point of rest, we'd have a much better chance of determining how fast the vehicle was going. But when you have just a corner clipping or glancing, it makes it more difficult to determine, even when you have an area of impact, which is where the person was when they got hit, and a point of rest where they landed, makes it more difficult for glancing contacts because you have that side swipe problem where they don't obtain what's called common velocity.
And what are some of the other difficulties in attaining specificity in a side swipe or being hit by a quarter panel as opposed to a fender?
So for a pedestrian, correct?
Yes.
So pedestrian impacts and how you move post-impact are very sensitive to your exact body position. For example, whether your right foot is on the ground or off the ground, whether your left foot is on the ground, off the ground, whether you jump up in response to the crash. Simply raising and lowering your arm changes the amount of rotation that's going to happen. Post-impact motion of the person. So cadavers, crash dummies, don't have any muscle reaction. So the motion of a crash dummy is just going to be like you're hitting a dead body, to where people will step, try and regain their balance if possible, will do additional activities that alters where they come to rest.
In your studies of direct pedestrian collisions by front or back bumper, as opposed to side swipe or clipping somebody, is there a similarity or difference in type of injuries that you see?
Yes.
And what is the difference?
So in direct centralized impacts, you tend to get much more severe injuries. Really what's occurring is you're getting that momentum transfer. So it's more, you're accelerating the person up to the vehicle. They can wrap onto the side in front of the vehicle at higher severities. Their head will hit the hood, their head will hit the rear of the vehicle. So when you have that direct contact, there's actually more momentum transferred to the actual occupant. There's more applied force to the occupant as well.
When you see direct impacts, is there ever the existence of lower body extremity injuries, broken bones in the legs?
So there can be both, depending, and again, it's very sensitive to where the foot is on the ground, whether the foot's on the ground, as well as the severity of the crash. In the presentation that I gave at the Actual Reconstruction Collision Safety Institute on pedestrian injuries, I went through all the literature on lower extremity injuries and looked at what parameters affected that. And so depending on how it was loaded, some at 15 miles an hour had no injuries. Some at 15 miles an hour had some fractures. It depended on how exactly the foot was loaded.
Is it uncommon in sideswipe pedestrian accidents to see no lower body broken bone?
No, it's not uncommon.
Have you had cases that you've studied or been involved with where you've studied the effect of a sideswipe or a clipping impact where there's an absence of broken bones in the lower body extremities?
Yes.
I'd ask you to turn to slide 139, please.
Oh, sorry. I fixed those other two slides.
Okay. Could you share with the jury what this represents?
Sure. So this was a trial that I was involved with in downtown Los Angeles. I've redacted the name at the top, but this was an instance where we had, this is a image from the police report. Oh, let me see if I can. So AOI in this diagram stands for area of impact. That's where the pedestrian was when they got hit. AOR is area of rest. And you can see we have information on exactly how far the pedestrian was thrown. Then on the right-hand side, we have photographs showing the impact to the pedestrian. This was determined by experts on both sides of this case to be between a 25 to 35 mile an hour impact. And then what you see is a close-up on the bottom slide of where there was DNA transfers, hair and tissue samples on the vehicle from the individual that was hit by the vehicle.
Next slide, please. And what does this represent?
So this is the decedent in the case, the person that was hit. He was killed at the scene. What you see on the left-hand image, oops. On the left-hand image is he had a massive laceration to his right forearm, but it didn't break his arm. There was no broken bones in his arm. On the right-hand side of this image, you see the autopsy report. What you'll notice is he had red marks on his leg, left buttocks, but he had no leg fractures. And again, this individual was hit at between 25 to 35 miles an hour.
Can you expand that? I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, sure.
Do you want that expanded like other times?
There you go.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. No, thank you. So to at the top, he had a severe brain injury, which again is the most common injury in pedestrian crashes. He did have fractures of the right 11th and 12th rib and a liver laceration. If you look at the extremities, it says right upper extremity. Again, that's from the shoulder to the end of the hand. Extremity wound with vascular injury, so no fractures. If you look where I was talking about the multiple abrasions, so when they're looking at the lower extremities, they're noting a number of red marks, but there was notably no fractures to the lower extremities.
Thank you. You can take that down, please.
Okay.
Dr. Welcher, regarding your analysis of the data and the evidence in this case, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty whether the absence of lower body brakes to Mr. O'Keefe is consistent with the defendant's Lexus impacting in a sideswipe or a clipping Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes, you could definitely have this type of impact and not have anything beyond, say, red marks to the lower extremity.
Thank you, Dr. Welcher.
My
Your
pleasure.
Honor, I would move into evidence subject to redactions, Dr. Welcher's PowerPoint presentation.